So I grew up in Staten Island. You take the train, every mile there's a stop, and there's one called Princess Bay. They built this thing, there's nothing there. For years, there's just nothing. Every place else you go, there's churches, there's a municipal courthouse, there's high schools. Princess Bay, there's nothing. So I just checked online before we started this week, and sure enough, there's a barber shop and a coffee shop, but still there's nothing there. So I want us to think about that as we build these stations and think about where we go. What I don't want to happen is to have us build our own Princess Bay. Right? We need to be thinking about where we are, having a thoughtful purpose. And that's why the second thing I want to talk about is CIO. And CIO is not as the Chief Information Officer, but it's actually the Central Imagery Office. And I was the Chief of Staff for the CIO when it was in Tyson's Corner, and we relocated it to Chantilly. And with us, we thought we were going to lose a bunch of employees. The ones in Maryland would never commute. Everybody came, 100%. But what also came were a whole bunch of contractors. And they started buildings. They started occupying all the space. And I think you see today some of the remnants of what we did back in the CIO in the 90s. And so what we have today, we're going to hear about Customs and Border Patrol, who's going to come to a location, and they're going to bring contractors. They need places to work. And we're going to see the same kind of growth that we saw around the Chantilly area for the agencies and intelligence agencies and where they are to be. So let's not build Princess Bay, but also let's make sure we accommodate the contractors, how to have a strong, stable workforce as we go out in the future. I think that secret lies in these Silver Line stations. So without further ado, this is truly a team effort. I wanted to bring Tony up here, Tony Howard from the Loudoun Chamber of Commerce, and just say welcome to Tony. And let him say a few words to all the Loudoun folks and the growth that's happening out there. So, Tony.
John, I just want to come up here and say thank you. Thank you for allowing the Loudoun Chamber to be a part of these Metro Mondays. I understand that they've been very successful in bringing folks information about what is happening at those stations, what should be happening at the station. So I'm really here to listen and learn, and that may defy conventional wisdom on my ability to listen and learn, but that's why I'm here, because I know you have some fantastic speakers. And looking forward to participating with the Dulles Regional Chamber on these and other initiatives as really, as you say, try to make the most out of the investment in Metro. Loudoun County has made a significant investment, a significant bet in Metro, and so we have to make certain that we get the best return on investment at all of our stations. And thank you again for allowing our chamber to be a part of this great discussion.
So I'm with Cooley. I'm a partner with Cooley, and I've been working with the Suave Group and SA Enterprises, the actual ownership entity on this property for a number of years. They acquired the property about 10 years ago, and it's been waiting for something to happen around the Silver Line and around the Metro stations, and we're really excited about what we're proposing here today. So here's the overview of the property. You've probably driven by it 100 different times, wondering what's going to happen there. The best marker for it is that as you drive up the Greenway, the pylon exists today in the median for the bridge, Barrister Street, that will run over the Greenway in that location. But in total, it's 158 acres, and it is spread across Loudoun County Parkway, with the portion up at the top that you see almost immediately adjacent to the future Ashburn station, and then the portion at the bottom of the slide, almost at the south, very, very close to the Loudoun Gateway station. So very close, really spans the distance between two metro stations, and because of this, we think it presents a number of amazing opportunities. Silver Line CPAM was initiated by the Board of Supervisors a couple years back. And what you can see on the right is the image that demonstrates what the plan as it came out of the Board of Supervisors and was sent to Envision Loudoun. Keith Merlin can affirm that this is what was sent to the Envision Loudoun stakeholders group. But you can see on the right is that the majority of the property is that pink color, and that pink color indicates that it should be developed with residential, a variety of medium and high density residential. And so what you see on the left is actually language from the plan calling for urban-style townhomes, multifamily, that these units and these buildings are 4 to 6 stories in height. So we're not talking about rest and town center densities. We're not talking about 20 stories, 15-story buildings. We're talking what I affectionately coin Loudoun appropriate densities. And it's intended to be compact, walkable, wide sidewalks, supported by a trail network and bike lanes. And so what that applying that plan to the property has yielded is the slide that you see here. So 3,706 residences. The vast majority, almost 90% of those units are multifamily units of one kind or another. Very innovative design. We've been working with architects, going crisscrossing the country to find the best and most attractive, most unique type of multifamily development. 381 townhomes. Those townhomes, obviously, you may have heard in Loudoun County, we're really in a shortage of single-family detached houses, single-family attached houses. So we're really excited about those. Those will be urban-style townhomes like you see in Brambleton Town Center, like you see at One Loudoun, some of those types of environments. We're also complying with the ADU ordinance in terms of affordability in the affordable dwelling units, also making, as the proffers are right now, a $7 million contribution to the unmet housing needs units. That's the Housing Trust Fund that gets at a broader range of affordability within the county. Then we've got almost 1 million square feet of non-residential, the vast majority of which is office that is located closest to the airport. We understand the concern of the airport and also the county to ensure that those planes are not flying over residences. So all of that office is really located in those overflight areas. And then we've got a 9-acre site for an urban elementary school. So much more condensed, compact, vertical elementary school. And then of that 158 acres, 56 of those acres are in open space. A lot of it is in the floodplain in the southern portion of the site. But we've also got pocket parks, dog parks, those sorts of things that we think will amenitize this environment. So I'm going to walk through from the inner core, the closest to the Ashburn station, all the way to the outer core to give you a sense of how this is evolving. So closest to the metro station is our most intense, most dense development. And we've got 689 multifamily units with about 23,000 square feet of ground floor retail. What you see on the right, and we're going to go through a number of slides like this, what you see on the right are possible representations of what those buildings might look like. So you can see much more urban than a traditional garden-style walk-up apartment. Really strong architecture, something that we can all be proud of. Moving a little bit further to the south, you may, as you notice, as you drive along the Greenway, there is an existing stormwater management pond. It's a good-sized pond, and we are going to locate restaurants around this, creating a really nice atmosphere for restaurants, for outdoor dining, maybe a bar experience for those folks who are getting right off the metro or our residents. It's about 20,000 square feet of restaurant space. And then moving to the outer core of this portion of the property, what you can see here are a number of multifamily type of units, as opposed to the first types of multifamily units with a central core that share a central core hallway experience here. What you're talking about here are really stacked units, either flats that are stacked on top of each other or 2-over-2 multifamily units, for a total of 611 multifamily units. This brings our total in this portion of the property that's closest to the Ashburn station to 1,300 units over a very small portion of the property. Then we move to the portion that's on the south side or the west side, depending on how you think of Loudoun County Park, right? People think of it different ways depending on the section. To our transit design supportive area. What's in the red box there are 381 townhomes. And like I said earlier, these are those really attractive urban townhomes. You can see just they appeal to a more urban experience, but they still have some suburban aspects of them because obviously they're townhomes. But not too many, 381, and we're really proud of them. We see them having rooftop decks like those units in Brambleton and One Loudoun. Those have been very, very attractive. And then we move into what we call our TDSA town core. And this TDSA town core has the bulk of our multifamily units, and these are in many cases podium park, not all cases, which means that those units are located above their parking spaces. There are some standalone parking garages. To be clear, for all of these units except for our townhomes, they're supported by structured parking in a parking garage. There's also about 200,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space, which means that as the residential gets built above it, in many cases that commercial is coming alongside it or beneath it at the very, very same time. So you're not getting a bunch of residential without the commensurate commercial, all of it's being constructed at the same time. And then we move to those office buildings. They've been located in a way, as I mentioned earlier, to be located closest to the airport, closest to the loudest overflight noise. And we've got about 760,000 square feet of Class A office. It's got the best visibility from the Greenway. We would love to get a signature tenant, a named tenant on any one of these buildings. But again, follows the plan that was endorsed by the Board of Supervisors and sent to the Envision Loudoun for their consideration. Really proud of the school site that's part of this. The school site, we've been working with the Loudoun County Public Schools. This gives you some ideas of what that urban school might look like. Really very different than many of the schools that exist in Loudoun County right now. It would also, just like the rest of our development, be supported by structured parking and a parking deck. And there will also be recreation fields. It's a little hard to see in this light, but there are also recreation fields there. So it's an urban experience with still some suburban aspects and the ball fields. And the key contribution is this broad run linear park. I saw Supervisor Meyer just walk in. He asked us for a wider swath than 100 feet. We're working with him on a wider swath than 100 feet. But the idea here is to create a very natural experience. Despite the urbanity of the Silver District West application, you'd have this broad run linear park with a meandering natural state trail. We're really excited about that, and it would connect all throughout and adjacent to the broad run floodplain, and we think it could create an experience that could take somebody all the way from the Loudoun Gateway Station at 606 all the way down to Brambleton's new active adult community called Birchwood. We've dedicated that trail down there. So you can really imagine how you can experience both something that's very, very bucolic and enjoyable and naturalistic alongside something that's urban. And why is this also important? This is so important because obviously these properties, these two parcels on either side of Loudoun County Parkway, are located within the Metro Tax District, not only playing into the capital investment aspect of the Metro Tax District, but paying ongoing operational costs at 20 cents per $100 of value. So the folks that live within here, the businesses that operate, that exist here, they're going to pay an additional 20 cents of tax in perpetuity to support, I think, hopefully all of our use of the Metro. And so we are excited to really put this into use, to put this into practice, and to continue to really support the extension of Metro to our area. And that is Silver District West. There's obviously a lot more information than I've done here, but I want to give you a high-level overview. I unfortunately have to run. I had another commitment. Bill Fox sends his regards. He was supposed to be here, but his flight got in late. And I would be happy to answer a question or two right now if anyone has them.
Thank you for having me. So I'm really excited for this to second of my Metro Monday chances to talk about how important the Silver Line is to Loudoun County. So, I said this last time, and it was a mixed crowd between Loudoun and Fairfax, so I get to say this with all honesty this time, since now we're solidly in Loudoun County. We like and want you all to say that the Silver Line begins in Loudoun County. We're not coming into Loudoun, it begins in Loudoun County. So we're really proud of the work that's being done around the Silver Line in Loudoun County and the opportunities that it's going to bring for us. And that's really what I want to focus on today, because you're going to hear from people like Colleen who can talk to you about the properties and what they're entitled for and what they have coming, and we're very excited about that. In the Department of Economic Development, we work with our property owners, with our developers, on the idea of the transit-oriented development, walkable urban places. Those are the words you're going to hear over and over and over again. But what I want to focus on is why. Why is that so important to us? And the reality is that Loudoun County Department of Economic Development, as we work with these properties, as we look at the Silver Line and we get ready for that coming in 2020, what that really means is our ability to grow, to shape the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of Loudoun County, and to really be able to decide what is that mix of urban, what is that mix of suburban, how do we protect this absolutely beautiful county that we live in, how do we continue to grow. And for us, economic development really means roads, schools, it means fire and rescue, it means police. And so when we talk about in the Department of Economic Development that we closed out last fiscal year with about $3.3 billion in commercial investment in the county, and that right now, standing here before we've closed out this year, we're over $6 billion in commercial investment, that we average about 3,700 jobs added, retained or added year over year, and we're already over 7,000 for this year. That means that the growth is already happening. It's already here. And we get an opportunity with the Loudoun Gateway Station, with the Ashburn Station, to really start to mold that future. So the Loudoun Gateway Station for us really is aptly named as a gateway. So you take the Silver Line coming in, you take the Fairfax stations, you take Innovation Station that straddles those two counties, you take the airport station, and then you have the Gateway Station that really is looking into Loudoun County and looking back out to the east, and really presents us an opportunity to connect this dense commercial growth that we have in eastern Loudoun with this absolutely beautiful, I'm so happy that I think Colleen already walked out to hear somebody else use the word bucolic nature of western Loudoun. And so when we look at the Loudoun Gateway Station, if I had my map up, and we look at its proximity to Data Center Alley, when we look at its proximity to the airport, and we look at how those properties really sit right there. They sit where we already have a strong commercial base, where we have this second to none fiber infrastructure. And we think that that's really a key to marketing these properties, is this proximity to 25 miles to Washington, D.C. You can wave to the planes as they're landing at Dulles. You have this Silver Line continuing into connecting the rest of Loudoun County. You have this commercial growth all around the Loudoun Gateway Station. So for us, it's a very exciting time as we're watching this growth in Loudoun County, and we're working on this transit-oriented development plan, as we're working towards these walkable urban communities. We have these properties at the Loudoun Gateway Station that really do give us a gateway. So you notice I'm dancing around the properties themselves, mostly because there are people who know more in the room who will be able to share that with you. But also because these particular properties around this station and what we see happening in the area is really mirroring the growth in the rest of Loudoun County. So as we work on these developments, as we work with, you'll hear later from American Real Estate Partners, and they'll talk to you about the exciting deal with Customs and Border Patrol at Quantum Park. It's a huge win for Loudoun. That's a huge government contract win, sitting right at the top of what we kind of consider the boundary of this station. And you look at the growth in Data Center Alley, and if you drive down Loudoun County Parkway, if you're not familiar, if you see these strange blue and orange tubes sticking up out of the ground, those are actually fiber conduits. And I think we talk about fiber and we talk about its importance and the tech importance to Loudoun County, but it's an interesting thing to see them in the ground and actually know that right there, Loudoun County and Waxpool is one of the highest concentrations of fiber in the world. And that's fueling the development in that area. So whether we're talking data centers, whether we're talking office development, we're talking these rich urban environments, what we like to say is we have an opportunity to rethink how people talk about suburban, what that definition is, what that growth is. And this station in particular sits right at that crossroads. It really is a gateway to that development. So the next time you're driving down Loudoun County Parkway, take a look and see if you can see the conduits, because that is the driver of what's happening in this area. That rich tech infrastructure, that commercial growth, and that gateway to the rest of Loudoun County. So we're very, very excited about what we have coming, and that I will be able to talk about without dancing around it. It was more fun at the Innovation Station one because everybody got to dance around the company everybody's going with and not say the name. But that's the name of the game, right? We're all looking at these big projects, and those are great. But the reality is we already have a strong commercial growth right there around the Loudoun Gateway. We recently announced an expansion at a company right off of Moran Road, Cuisine Solutions, manufacturing facility right here in the heart of Loudoun County, adding hundreds of jobs to their facility right off of the Loudoun Gateway Station. So the growth is there, it's happening. And what I would tell you is that we continue to see that growth, we continue to work on that growth, work with our developers, work with our property owners, but it's the community support that really takes us to that next level. It really inspires the pictures that you saw from Colleen, that you'll see from the other developers, to really shape that story for Loudoun County for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So I'm happy to take any questions. I'm very excited to be here. Economic Development is so happy to be a part of this Metro Monday program and be able to talk about all the great things that we see coming down the Silver Line.
I thought I'd explain a little bit first who I am and a little bit about American Real Estate Partners, and then we can kind of dive into the fun stuff with Custom Border Protection. It's actually Custom Border Protection, not patrol. I say patrol all the time, and I got scolded at a meeting that we're not patrol, we're protection. So I learned my lesson there. But anyway, American Real Estate Partners started about 12 years ago. So I'm one of three principals, three owners of the company. We're based here. Our headquarters is in Herndon, but we essentially are real estate investors. We invest in commercial office properties in the Mid-Atlantic, and we define the Mid-Atlantic as really northern New Jersey down to Raleigh-Durham in North Carolina. And we're contemplating expanding beyond that footprint, but really our background, our roots, where we kind of made our bones in the business is really here in Northern Virginia, and it's where our home is. So that's us. I thought I would talk a little bit about kind of our investment thesis, not to get too heavy about it, but just kind of from a big picture standpoint, what we found attractive about Quantum Park, which was, as you guys know, it is the Verizon campus, and before that MCI, and it's had a lot of names and lives to it. But from an investment standpoint, as a real estate investor, first of all, you try to see, hey, where's a competitive advantage? What can you do to kind of figure out a particular property and an investment, and then see if you can do something to it to make a return for your investment, or for your investors. Quantum Park is such a big property. It's enormous. It's 1.8 million feet. It's, of course, the big Verizon leased space there, but was a lot of vacancy. There's potential data center ground. It's complicated. So a lot of investors looked at it and said, wow, we love this market, but it's a little bit difficult to get your arms around because it requires a lot of multiple skill sets, development, property management, construction, understanding data centers, understanding office leasing, understanding GSA leasing, which was certainly a key part of our strategy. So when we first looked at it, we said, wow, if we knew Verizon was going to be there for the long term, what could we do with the remainder of this property, which was, about 500,000 feet of existing vacant office space? What could we do? Where is the kind of logical play here? And of course, we thought about GSA. They are by far the biggest space users in this area still. They tend to take down big blocks of space. But most importantly, since it's Metro Monday, without Metro, you kind of can't be in the GSA game. So I think more than anything, out in Loudoun, the fact that you have these Metro stations is just opening up an enormous demand driver and space user in Washington. It's really as simple as that. So when we looked at it, we said, wow, we have Metro, we have this fantastic facility. It's big. We bought it well, so that we bought it well below replacement cost. If you went out and tried to build these buildings today, there's no way you'd be able to achieve a price with GSA to attract them to the point that we were able to attract them. So all of those things put together made it kind of an exciting opportunity for us, and thankfully we were able to secure. And it's not done yet. But it's, just tweaking right now. But we were able to attract the interest of Custom Border Protection. And what that means for, I think, all of us here is it's bringing an enormous amount of jobs. It's about, 3,700. I think that's, at a minimum, frankly. And I think what you mentioned earlier, the tail that basically the companies that this agency will attract will be enormous. We have another 300,000+ feet to lease, and we are just really optimistic that almost immediately we're starting to get activity from these government contractors who need to be near Custom Border Protection. So all of that is really, really exciting for us. I think another little fact that came out last year, the brokerage community in Washington came out with these statistics about space absorption in Washington metropolitan area in general, and proximity to metro stations. 70% of all leasing activity, all leases that occur, happen within very close proximity to Metro. So to flip it the other way, if you're not on Metro, you are fighting for the 30% of the tenants who are willing to lease space and not be on Metro. So again, you can't overstate the importance of it and how important it is to the whole area, but especially important to the success of attracting custom border protection. Trying to think of what else I can tell you about the deal. It's 445,000 feet. It's very complicated because it's a highly secure facility, as you can imagine. There's $178 million in investment. A big chunk of that is this very highly secure portion of the construction that's needed to go in. We're excited to get going. The building itself is going to be beautiful. We're spending significant dollars to upgrade the lobbies, and so it's not just going to be kind of a bunker. It's going to be a beautiful building. And I know the GSA folks are really, really excited about it. They're really excited about this area. That was one of the things we were concerned about. Would they be attracted to the area? And what's come out is they're really excited about being out here in Loudoun. So again, all of the kind of tumblers clicked into place, and we were very fortunate to attract them. It's my wife's birthday today, so I was told normally you have questions after. I'd be happy to address any questions now so I can go and buy her a birthday gift before I get home. No, I got it. I already got it. I'm kidding. So.
Any questions?
No questions. I need to have.
Oh, there's one right here. Yeah.
Being a big real estate company, do you guys have any implementation for controls, how you manage all the buildings, the building automation, the fire and security? Does it all tie into one, or is it all separate?
It's generally separate. We use third party, we use Data Watch, we use Castle and some of for security. In this particular case, for custom border protection, we have dozens of security consultants. So this is a level that we haven't dealt with before. So it's not like you get your little Castle card or your little fob and you can swipe. This is it's an entirely different animal we're dealing with here. But for us, it's usually just building by building. We do have it automated so that we have access to all of our portfolio in one kind of website. But for security, it's mostly building by building. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have about 500. I'll
Yeah,
just give you
yeah.
a couple.
Yeah.
So you talked about Metro. We're
Yes.
seeing ridership really down, not where we expected it to be with existing Silver Line. Do you think that's going to grow? Is it going to take years to build it and they'll come? Where do you think we're at with that?
This is near and dear to my heart. It's a really good question. It's really paradoxical to me. I live in Alexandria, and I come out to Herndon. And I don't want to sound like, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I spend probably $500 a month on hot lanes. Now, not everybody can do that. It's irrational really for me to do it, right? But I travel, just to put that in context, I'm just not, of my two partners, I handle kind of operations and leasing, so I go around to a lot of our buildings, so I'm driving around a lot. But that's a stupid amount of money to be spending, right? For just driving on the Beltway.
Not for your time, for what you probably build.
I lie to myself and say, it's worth the 30 minutes extra that I'm that important that, my 30 minutes is. But what I find interesting, we also have a site in Tysons, and as you know, in Fairfax County, they're limiting new construction, they're limiting parking to, I think it's 2.2 per 1,000. So there's this interesting confluence. You have the Beltway that is the Beltway, very clogged. You have the hot lanes that are enormously expensive. You have new development in some of the major urban areas that are limiting parking to 2.2. You have tenants that are trying to maximize efficiencies and packing more and more and more people per square foot into buildings. And they're also asking for more parking all the time. So all of these things are kind of, you throw that in the blender, and I don't understand why ridership isn't going up. I hate to say that it has to, people will be forced to. You want to think that it's just a better option. But I agree with you. I've seen the statistics as well, and I'm a little baffled by it.
But GSA didn't decide to wait to put one right next to the station. They said we'll go for existing. And so we're now going to be relying on shuttle buses?
Yes, we're doing the shuttle bus program, and, again, GSA, fortunately for us, it's very difficult to meet the GSA economic thresholds that you have to keep the economic terms. As a taxpayer, it's a good thing. You have to keep economic terms at a certain threshold. Going above that, you almost automatically get bounced out. New construction can't deliver product at the price point that GSA is able to lease it. So that's why we were really excited when we acquired this big block. But again, it's got to change. It's just got to change. But I think it's going to take time.
How about outside of it? There's a lot of open office space that we'd love to develop. With the sites you said, almost sounds a little bit like the ExxonMobil, where they're able to take great technology, location, and return it into some, repurpose it. But we've got a lot of space that doesn't have that connectivity, kind of sit in the middle parks. Where do we go with those? Any thoughts?
The big thing in our industry now is placemaking. You used to be, and you're seeing it with the renderings that were put up earlier. The old, I have an interesting history. I used to be a broker, as my two partners were. We're sitting here in Dulles Corner. Back in the 80s, I was leasing this park with Ray Smith. And at the time, Reston Town Center was being developed at exactly the same time. And people didn't really know then what was the best approach to building a suburban office park. They started developing Reston Town Center at the same time as this. Ray Smith was extremely well capitalized, went all over the country and picked the best elements of all these very big office parks around the country and developed very high quality real estate out here to this day. I mean, these are very high quality buildings. But at the time, that was what people thought was, bucolic ponds, beautiful stone bridges, all of these things. And Reston Town Center, people didn't get it. So obviously, Reston Town Center kind of won the race, and not that this is bad, but what people want is they want walkable amenities, they want a place, they want kind of authenticity, or you can argue Reston, maybe doesn't have, but it's a phenomenal place, right? So, but they want mostly walkable amenities. It used to be, hey, you had a fitness room in your office building, and you're sheltering people from the elements, and they have parking spaces, and that's what you did. Now you have to have conferencing facilities, food options, fitness, tenant lounges and amenity areas, all of these things that tenants are now demanding. But mostly it's the public transportation. Even if it's not being used, you get eliminated as a developer or as an owner if you don't have it. So.
If I could also interject, I received this in the mail today. It says Quantum Park, exceptional fiber connectivity and power capacity. I'm in the telecom business, and my company deals with a firm that needs to have a phone system installed, and they're moving in the building. Their big concern is, can I get service to the building? What is the level of high quality internet, and is there redundant fiber? And in this particular park, there are 18 telecom providers and absolutely incredible power redundancy. So
yeah, I'm sure there's
what makes the decision.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people in this room who are smarter about the whole data center thing than I am, although we're getting a fast lesson in it. I've known it from afar, but not now that we're really drilling down into it. This is the most extraordinary, Ashburn is the most extraordinary data center in the world. And the statistics are mind-boggling. 80% of all internet traffic touches down at May East in Ashburn. We're developing more data center in 2018, 2019 than Silicon Valley has in its inventory. So the statistics, we are so far ahead and so much bigger than really anybody else in the world that it's remarkable. It's really remarkable. So, anyway, thank you.
Please give
Thank you very
Michael
much.
a round of applause.
We have a great vision for what's happening at the Loudoun Gateway Station. As everybody's heard, it's obviously the second station in Loudoun County. And honestly, a lot of what I want to do today, I want to do three things. One is set expectations for what the vision for development is around the station. And I think that's important. And then two, I want to go into some of the peripheral developments that we started to talk about. And then three, I want to get a little bit more into detail about why the Board of Supervisors is so excited about AREP and the Customs and Border Protection deal. And so first of all, what I want to say about 606 is that our transportation network is key to any potential growth long term. And that the airport and the landowners have been extremely generous and thoughtful with working with the county on expanding that transportation network. As some of you might have known or seen the signs in 2015, I ran on building an alternative route to the Dulles Greenway, which obviously charges $6 each way every day, no matter if you go one exit or two exits. And this impacts, by the way, this station, because this station is located just about a mile off of that first Greenway exit. So if people want to visit the station, the fastest way will actually charge you $6 each way if you want to take the most direct path. Otherwise, you have to go up Loudoun County, you have to go up Route 28 and then take 606 over. And so we're building an entirely new transportation network. So we're extending Shellhorn Road to Sterling Boulevard at Route 28, which will basically parallel the Dulles Greenway. And we're also extending Prentice Drive. So the part over by the post office will meet over where Quantum Park is located. And so instead of just having one really, really expensive option, we're now going to have numerous east-west connectivity around this station. And the county and the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, most likely, potentially some smart scale funds, are going to mean we actually have a real road network around these stations. And it's going to be delivered probably a couple years after the metro opens, but we're going as fast as possible. We're in design for all of the projects I've mentioned. We're in design for construction with all the design, with all the projects I mentioned. And so what actually we foresee happening, a lot of our planning saw really high density commercial, but what we're seeing is that the demand for data center is just really, really high. So high to the point of where data center land is actually selling more per acre than residential in Loudoun County. And everybody knows how expensive residential is in Loudoun County. And so we're seeing data center demand grow so high that really I don't think there's going to be any way to really stop data centers from encapsulating most of the north side of this station around the metro station. Now, of course, there's some good things and some bad things about that. The bad things are that, of course, when we first envisioned bringing metro, you envision transit-oriented development. And so having data centers there isn't exactly a high-density use. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have some uses that are high-density amongst the data centers, but it looks like largely on that north side it's going to be data center. On the good side, it's an incredible amount of revenue in our metro tax district. I see Chairman York here, former Chairman York here. They set up in order to pay for and finance the metro construction a metro tax district. In order for that to be successful, we need parcels to develop. And so these data centers in many ways are going to be financing Loudoun's investment in these metro stations. And so as these data centers develop, of course, we're working on making sure that any data centers have better design standards than what's allowed by right. And so that'll be important to the look and feel of these stations. But it's also going to be financing our contributions to metro. So it's not an overall loss if we have a significant amount of data centers in this area. Now, you already got a presentation from Silver District West. We're working very hard with that applicant. 3,700 homes is an incredible amount of homes. It's a lot, especially for our residents to digest. However, I think the leaders of the opposition to that application, they have one slogan, and I actually think it's brilliant. The opposition says infrastructure first. Infrastructure first. Not infrastructure only or no development or no growth. They're saying infrastructure first. I think that's incredibly reasonable. And so, I've sort of conveyed many specific requests on what infrastructure first means when it comes to investing in schools and investing in the roads in order to facilitate that sort of growth around the metro stations. And I think that sort of cooperation and collaboration will allow for us to move forward applications like the one you saw earlier. And so that's, I think, potentially exciting. I think having a massive park in between two metro stations with that broad run linear park, and then we're working on expanding it actually in this application zone, will be a draw. The great thing that we saw about the last presentation with the hub and waterside is that they're mixing the green space into the development. And what I've taken is their principles and trying to say, you know what, all of our applications around the stations, I think, really need to think about that. How can Loudoun's metro stations be different? Because if we're competing against Herndon and Reston and all the way into Arlington and Tysons, people are usually going to choose closer to DC if given other choices, right? Now we have the airport, and that's a huge advantage too, and so we have a little bit of a draw there. But what are our other competitive advantages that we can do? And I think it's better planning. I think it's more green planning. When I say green, I don't just mean with green as an environmental, I mean actually having real environment, not just environmental building, but actually have real environment, like actual green stuff, trees, parks, into these developments. And so the great thing is our developers that we're working with have that vision too and are willing to work with us, and that's great news. So I want to talk a little bit about Customs and Border Protection. It's a fantastic deal for the county. In order for us to get it here, though, it wasn't easy. It wasn't just a matter of saying we like you, come and locate here. We had to offer an incentive package to offset all of the taxes. Now, usually when federal government buildings relocate, they purchase property, and that property is tax-free already. And so we were basically doing, if they had bought the property instead of lease it, do the same sort of taxation there. But the benefit is we actually still get our metro tax district money. And so we're still coming out ahead. And then if you think about all the development from the restaurants, which are struggling, by the way, right now during lunch, which are not going to struggle when Customs and Border Protection opens, to all of the support businesses that'll be around it, Loudoun will make millions in revenue, much less, probably even higher than that when you're talking about economic impacts. And so, and by the way, the only way that Quantum Park is accessible to the Loudoun Gateway Station is via Shellhorn or Prentice Drive, right? And so if Loudoun's not investing, just in those two roads alone, we're looking at about $150 million of infrastructure investment. These stations would almost be useless. So multimodal means multimodal. Yes, we're investing in Metro, we're investing a lot in Metro, but in order to make Metro work, you also have to get people to and from the stations. And so that's what we're doing, and I think that's what you see with the results with the AREP deal with Customs and Border Protection. We did the incentive package, but we also did the transportation package that we've been planning before. And so we're moving forward with that, and that's why we're seeing future prospects, and I think that they are good. Like I said, data centers I think are going to dominate the market for now, but around the Ashburn Metro Station, which I think will be next, innovation we talked about last time, and I still think around the peripheral of this station, there's lots of opportunity. In the short term and in the long term, there's a ton of opportunity because there's a lot of potential for redevelopment in our industrial areas, which are actually very close to this station. And the only way that redevelopment would be possible, by the way, is if we extend Sterling Boulevard into Shellhorn and have that connection, the east-west connection. And so it all comes back to what our county is doing is fundamentally unique, is we are investing in roads and schools faster than any other county in the country per capita, right? And so we're able to facilitate this sort of booming growth. But at the same time, while Fairfax has raised their taxes, and this includes on businesses, 25% in the last 5 years, we have actually lowered taxes during my term on the board, meaning that it's actually much less to do business here. And so for the first time, actually, I think in quite a long time, the Loudoun County tax rate's actually lower than the Fairfax County tax rate. And if you look at the assessments, we're much lower overall with that tax bill. And so we have a lot of competitive advantages. It's not just that we have green space, it's also that we have a lower cost of doing business. You have a hands-on team. I think if you talk to Doug Fleet, who was the main guy for AREP, the CEO, he'll tell you that we had a lot of late-night phone calls. Buddy Reiser, who you've heard from, I'm sure, we had a lot of late-night phone calls. That deal was close at times to not getting done, but we were able to make it work because we have a hands-on team in Loudoun County. If you have a business that wants to move here, if you have people who are interested in land, if you have a vision, you don't just meet with a couple staff members. You can meet with me, you can meet with Buddy Reiser. We're going to be there and we're going to walk you through this. We're going to show you our vision and why Loudoun's the best place to be. So not only do the numbers work, not only are we investing in roads and in metro and in all the infrastructure you can imagine, we're also going to be here to help. And so if I can ever be of assistance, if our office can ever be of assistance, I said this is the last one, please let us know. I know a lot of the folks in the room know this. If you email me, I will email back. If you ask for a meeting, probably eventually you'll get one, sometimes quicker than others, but I'll at least be able to do a phone call. I have to have another full-time job besides the one because we're still a part-time board, and a 1-year-old, by the way, who's really cute. That's where I'm going after this. And so I think with that, I will say thank you, and I can take maybe a question or two now before I have to run.
Yes.
Yeah, and so if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And if not, I'll make a dash and go see my baby Lincoln.
Anyone have a question?
I got one. 2.7% unemployment.
Yes, isn't that
What the
nice?
heck? How
That's
are we going
good.
to get people to come work? We got to build a bridge to get Maryland people over here, or what? How are we gonna do that?
Well, I do support building the bridge, and actually for the first time in a long time, we're actually making moves to put our alignment of where the bridge crossing would go onto our comprehensive plan. And so that's not just a joke, it's a reality for us. Obviously, Maryland has a long way to go politically, but it's not impossible. And I think if either of us get you-know-who to land, I think whoever it is will want to make sure that there's connectivity between the two, because you're going to need it. If it's here, you're going to need Maryland workers. If it's over there, you're going to need Loudoun workers. But the metro stations are obviously pivotal to that, and that's also fixing the east-west divide. Having that metro access to Loudoun will help fix that east-west divide and bring employees from that direction. But if you think about it too, yes, 2.7% unemployment in Loudoun, but in places like Sterling and in Leesburg, or Herndon, obviously in Fairfax County, we can still use more economic development, more economic growth to empower people who have been historically in poverty. And we've seen good things happen here in the last couple of years. We can continue that trend. But the other thing is that we have more than 9,500 housing units approved in the metro corridor that haven't been built yet. And so you can move your workers here. We have housing capacity along these stations. And by the way, I think we're going to do more and more to partner with local universities to make sure we can train people and get them into these jobs of the 21st century.
I like all those hot tools down in the 66 inside the Beltway. Just move the businesses out here, and you won't have to.
Yeah, they finally announced they're changing the algorithm a little bit, but the cheapest way, and this is what's great about AREP, and this is what I said about that Customs and Border Protection deal, we're shifting the entire direction of gravity out here, right? That's the first of many government deals we're going to do.
So last one is, so I'm pretty confident now that I get off that metro, it's not going to have an arrow that says one way, this way to data centers, or this way to shuttle buses. There's going to be other things around there that'll really excite us.
For the Loudoun Gateway Station, you might see something like that. I want to set expectations realistically. However, at the other two metro stations, we'll be featuring Innovation Avenue and Ashburn Metro Station. We will have lively, transit-oriented development at those two. And I think long-term, the Dulles Gateway Station still does have potential to do something like that.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcia McAllister. I have been with the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority as the spokesperson for the Dulles Rail Project for 12 to 13 years. I think it's 13. I haven't checked the calendar lately. But I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the station, a little bit about concrete, and then I have a team with me that's going to take you into other issues about the Airports Authority. Dusty Smith, who works directly with the rail project, and Michael Cooper, who's going to talk to you about the Airports Authority's future role and their interest in what goes on in and around the airport. But let's get going on this. The map above shows you where the Loudoun Gateway Station is in relation to the other 5 stations that are in Phase 2 of the rail project. And you can also see the Ashburn Station, which is not too far away. It seems like the greatest distance between any of our stations is probably the Dulles Airport Station and the Loudoun Gateway Station, and most of that property is on Airports Authority property. It might be interesting, if you don't know, to remember that the Airports Authority own the alignment for the entire 23-mile extension of the Metro line known as the Silver Line. And if that had not been the case, this project would have had a hard time ever taking off, but it was planned since 1962. This map again shows you the exact locations of the stations, and if you'll take a look at the bright yellow blob here, this is the future maintenance facility that the rail project is building for Metro. It's on 90 acres of Airports Authority property. It will employ more than 350 people. It will be a 24-hour operation. It is off of Route 606, very close to Mercure Business Park, if you're familiar with that, but it is on Airports Authority property. We have a separate contractor building that. It's Hensel Phelps, based in the Loudon part of Chantilly, and they're progressing, sometimes slower than we'd like, but they're progressing well on it and have plans to finish in plenty of time for opening, because that's a requirement of the project. And you see the red track has that little split going off. That's where it goes, where you see the rail line going off of the gateway of the Greenway sometimes, and you wonder where that's going into the woods. It is going into the woods. It's going into the woods, as is a great portion of the rail line once you leave the airport's property. I want to talk to you a little bit about the station. As you can tell here, it is along, let's go to the next slide. It is in the middle, sitting there right along the Greenway, near the Dulles North Transit Center, the airport, Commerce Center Court, the Greenway, Lockridge, etc. That gives you a good feeling of where it is. As some people say, in the middle of the trees, not a whole lot going on immediately around it. But one of the busiest things around it is the Dulles North Transit Center, which will become part of the parking for this station. All in all, we'll have 2,750 parking spaces there. There's a parking garage under construction there. The garage is being built not by us, but by Loudoun County. I tried to get an update on their percentage of construction, but you can see it going on. But I don't have the new numbers now. If you go a little bit further west and look at the Ashburn station, one of the two parking garages at that point is almost complete. It's the one being built by Comstock. And Comstock plans to open that garage before the rail project opens, probably within the next 8 to 9 months, to be used in the interim as paid parking to serve some of the development there. This is some of the work that's going on at the Gateway Station. This was early, I don't even know how long ago, but this was just when we were starting to build in that area. And let's go. We're on track to make our construction deadline, but there's some bumps in the road that we've hit sometimes, weather, etc. But we're still on track according to the contractor, which is Clark Construction and Kiewit joint venture, have said that they're on track to make the deadline. Let's go quickly. Okay, this is the construction at this point, where the concrete panels on the exteriors of the station have been put into place, and we also have the rooftop sitting on portions of this station. I'm going to deviate right here for a minute, and I want you to take a look at those panels which are on the outside of this station. They look like red brick, see? And then you can see the interior panels, the interior of those which are gray. These are something that have been in the newspapers and radio and TV the last 2 weeks, and I'm going to deviate and talk about that a little bit, and then Dusty's going to take over the additional information about other stations. We've had a water problem that's affected panels. We have 1,750 of these concrete panels, ranging in size from several tons up to 24 tons, that have been put in place as part of our construction. They're being installed by Clark Construction. They were made by Universal Concrete in Pennsylvania, and we discovered along the way, after we started placing these panels, that there were some problems. The first problem that resulted: too much water in the concrete mix. That means problems. There's too much water in the concrete mix, it loses its durability and its stability. It is not a safety problem. It's a long-term problem. Only in that the contract requires Clark to provide a project that will still be viable and sturdy and reliable 100 years from now. With the problems in the concrete, it meant that those panels, not the structure itself, were going to crumble and start deteriorating long before that 100-year time. So as we were working with the contractor and trying to figure out how exactly to fix this, another problem occurred. We discovered that when they mixed the concrete, they also did not have the right mix of air in the concrete, so there were no air bubbles. And those bubbles allow the water that's in the concrete when they freeze to have a place to freeze and expand, resulting in more cracks if they're not fixed. Well, we had several people throughout this time doing all kinds of inspections. We have we're proud of our quality team, but not maybe quite as proud as we should have been at the time. But we had our people go up to the concrete plant, and in the process of being at the concrete plant, we discovered problem 3. I want you to take a look at the edge of this and pretend it is a panel. A panel is more like a flat door, a door that's going on. And imagine that there's steel in the middle, and above and below, there's concrete. Well, what we discovered was in watching, there was insufficient concrete covering both sides of the rebar, which also was letting water getting into the concrete, and that would result in rust and further damage. And that's our problems. At this point, we have approximately 1,750 of those that are affected. We have replaced and taken down the majority of the panels already that need to be placed. Starting tomorrow night, we will start to remove the last 31 that need to be taken down and replaced. We have an interesting piece of equipment that you will see operating near the Herndon station starting later this week that was built by the contractor to make this happen. In this area, some of those panels weigh 24 tons. So this is going to be interesting. There's no impact on public safety in doing this work. We may have some lane closures or two from time to time, but all of you know we've had lane closures for the past 10 years on this project, and I think everybody is used to those. The solution to making these panels survive to the 100-year durability expected of them is to coat everything besides the ones that have taken out and the mix redone, etc. But we're going to cover not only the ones that were found to be defective, but we're going to cover all 1,700 of them with a special coating. Sounds like a silane fluid, but it's SELINE. Been used since 1847 to keep water from intruding into concrete surfaces. The first sprays will be done this summer by Clark Construction, and every 5 years they will be checked, but every 10 years that coating must be reapplied. Clark Construction will set up what's called a sinking fund. Kind of ironic, but a sinking fund for Metro, where they will be able to conduct the every 10-year coating for perpetuity, basically. And this does not come out of your tolls. I'll tell you that now. This money, this part of the project is pretty much on the contractor. There have been some other problems that have come up this year, including weather, etc. But on the whole, we are facing the problems. We found the problems. We've told them to fix them. And the Airports Authority will make sure that they are all fixed and that this project does sustain itself as a 100-year project and also be safe. And there's nothing happening that's a risk to the public. Dusty, I'm going to let you take over and take them further west where they'll see a little bit more of the positive stuff that is happening. Dusty Smith.
Hello, everybody. I work with Marcia, which is a great joy. This next slide here, we just wanted to show you, this is just a little bit more of the construction that has gone on at Loudoun Gateway so far. And go one, I got this one. And this shot is a little bit more of what you're going to see now. Honestly, even this shot is old because they're getting closer to completing the vaulted roof at the station. But you can see the one pedestrian panel that goes off to the north side. At this station, we are going to ultimately have that pedestrian panel comes down to the pavilion. Pavilion is going to also be attached to a garage that Fairfax County is building. There will be 2,750 spaces in the garage, 2,750 spaces total with 750 of those being part of the Dulles North Transit Center that exists now. This slide just gives you a little bit of an idea for the access toward the station. Let's see not sure which one the light is here. But right, that's the pavilion, that's the garage, and this right here is a pedestrian walkway. It's kind of this grayish thing. Goes over, and then Fairfax will build another walkway over to the garage. Just an aerial shot to show you this is what it looked like about a year ago. And that's it. We just wanted to get you oriented a little bit for Loudon Gateway Station. Thank you very much.
So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've heard earlier. Some people who have heard the presentations of the Airport Authority about the Silver Line and about development around the Silver Line can in some ways predict a little bit about what we're going to focus on. But the bottom line is Dulles Airport is part of your infrastructure here. Dulles Airport is a catalyst for the economic development of Loudoun, Fairfax, Northern Virginia, and the Commonwealth. Dulles Airport is one of the reasons why Amazon or any other company is thinking about moving here and bringing the jobs that they're bringing here. So we're very, very dedicated to helping the community to preserve and protect the areas around Dulles Airport, particularly in the noise-sensitive areas, so that as the development will occur over the next 50 years, we do it in a manner that will help the airport to continue to grow. So if I'm going to talk a little bit about Dulles, why am I talking a little bit about Reagan National to begin with? Well, I want you to orient yourself right here to the main runway of DCA and the communities that are around the runway about Crystal City, you see Washington, D.C., Arlington, Alexandria, et cetera. These are communities that are very constantly, in fact, just last week, meeting to ask the FAA to change the flight paths that emanate from the north and southbound of the main runway, all up and down the river. And in Loudoun County, we don't have the benefit of a river where airplanes can fly to and from the airports. But this is the flight paths that are occurring around DCA. The red is the outbound, the blue is the inbound, and the communities are rightfully hearing airplane noise, and they're asking the FAA what can be done about it. The FAA controls the airspace from the time a plane time the plane approaches the taxiway. The FAA controls where that pilot goes. And the FAA and the pilot, I should say. It's not the airport. So the communities are very, very active in asking the FAA to change the flight paths, and more importantly, and something a lesson learned for all of us here in Loudoun County, to limit the evening flight time activity that occurs out of this airport. It is going on real time right now. The community response is simply to restrict aviation activity from occurring near residential areas. So as we know, Dulles is a lot bigger than Reagan National. This is actually a proportional size of Reagan National compared to Washington Dulles International Airport. And you can almost fit Reagan National in between the two main runways of Dulles Airport. There is a lot of growth that's going to occur at Dulles Airport over the next 50 years. Certainly, we're talking today about various rail stations. There's two that will all be on Dulles property. There'll be some south concourses built out over time, a new south terminal. You've heard a little bit about a Western Lands. There'll be a new runway, a fifth runway that's not yet built, but is oriented in the same as the east-west runway that we have currently. And I should say that something that changed just in the last couple of months is the FAA has notified us that these three runways here are, as part of their next-gen program, going to be receiving what they call triple simultaneous arrivals and departures. When they are planning the airspace for next-gen, one of the next-gen is, as you know, we're getting away from a radar-based tracking system of planes, and we're moving to a GPS base. It's much more precise. And when the FAA is planning next-gen across the country, last year, their FAA staff studied the viability of triple simultaneous arrivals and departures for any airport in the country that can accommodate triple simultaneous arrivals and departures, where they can program those arrivals and departures to occur simultaneously at all three runways that are in parallel. Dulles Runway is one of the nationwide airports that will receiving triple simultaneous arrivals and departures. And as many of you in the room know, one of the reasons why this new fourth runway was moved over to the left somewhat was to accommodate those triple simultaneous arrivals and departures if the FAA should do so, and they are. Loudoun has carefully protected airspace, residents from the airplanes that are flying overhead, and protected the airports from complaints about residences. With an airport impact overlay district, we are currently doing a new noise contour study of this airport impact overlay district, which we will submit the results to Loudoun County for their consideration and review at the Board of Supervisors level. The reason we're doing that study grows directly from the FAA's change in the airspace with the triple simultaneous arrivals and departures and the increase of cargo that is likely to occur if Amazon or other such companies begin to come here. Cargo flies primarily at night, and the addition of new international destinations, which are currently arriving at Dulles 1:30, 2:30, 3:30 in the morning. So for a long time, the Airport Authority has worked very, very closely with the Loudoun Board of Supervisors to protect the area, particularly around the 606 station, from residential uses. And in fact, the Airport Authority met with many of you who were in this room and your attorneys some time ago, back in the early 90s, to kind of talk about the importance of protecting that area before the 606 station was located there. And at the time, the very clear message we heard from the community was that the 606 station would be the type of station that would have a lot of commercial development, it would be a transit center development, and that residential was not likely to occur, particularly in the north parts of the 606. So on that notion, the Airports Authority and all project partners have proceeded to build the Silver Line. We are continuing to partner with Loudoun County. The Supervisor Meyer mentioned the use of the realignment of Shellhorn Road, part of which will occur, that right-of-way will occur on airport property. We're pleased to work in partnership with Loudoun County in this transportation option, as we are pleased to work with the entire metro region for the transportation option of putting all the infrastructure that's going to support this rail project onto airport property, and earlier the rail yard and other parts of that infrastructure were mentioned. So a little bit, and my good friends from Silver District West will bear with me for a second. I'm going to use them as an example, if I can, of just some things that are being considered here. And when I'm using as an example, I want to say this is a partnership. There's a balance that will be maintained here. And the Airports Authority has every expectation that this Board of Supervisors will arrive at that proper balance to protect residents from the airport and the airport from residents. But let me tell you where we are currently with some of the proposals that are out there. So this is the airport contours of 65 D&L. That means in the brown, no residential should occur in that area. In the gray, it's mostly in this area is industrial commercial zoned uses. There are a number of petitioners who have come forward to the airports, to the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, and asked for that zoning to be rezoned into residential. All kinds of different suggestions and ideas. But typically, and by current zoning, Loudoun could consider those residential uses in that area if they do three things. If the minimum of three things. If the developer agrees to heavily insulate so that the interior of the residence is down to 45 or 55 dB. If the developer gives notice to the airport, gives notice to the homeowner that there's an airport nearby, and if the owner provides an aviation easement to the Airports Authority to continue flying over their homes. That said, think about the earlier slide. Every one of those communities who met last week with the FAA to tell them to move the flight paths have known that DCA has been there since 1941. And they are petitioning limiting nighttime activity at their local airport. So Silver District West falls, a portion of which falls in the 65 EIS, falls in part of this 2005 EIS 65 LDA and contour. And we are strongly encouraging the property development owners and the Board of Supervisors to go ahead and put as much residential as you want in this area that's outside the 60 and the 65, but be very careful not to intrude into the 65 and be very carefully considerate of what you're doing between the 60 and the 65. The property owner knew what they bought when they bought that property, and the property owner is seeking to have reconsideration of zoning. We understand this is business. The airport is part of the infrastructure of the area as well. But just to keep this particular development in perspective, this is the center line of the runway, of the new 4th runway. Runs right up that spine, right there. And the distance between the center line of the runway and the proposed new residential is 511 feet. To put that in perspective, if that same, this is the main runway at DCA, this is Crystal City, which exists 2,700 feet west of the main runway. This development would occur 511 feet west of the center line of the main runway. So basically people are going to hear noise, and they're going to hear a lot of noise, and they're going to hear continuing noise that will continue throughout their lifetime and into the evening when their kids are sleeping and whatnot. And we just want Loudoun County to be aware of where the planes fly right now. So in proximity to that particular development, this is the arrivals. The arrivals occur about 500 feet above that point. Keep that in perspective, the Washington Monument is about 555 feet. So just for kicks, we took the distance from the end of the runway and ran it out to approximately where this star is right now, which is just north of the Silver Line District West. And by comparison, we took a look at what is the flight activity that's occurring over the center runway, which is just around the same point there. And this is the results of what we're seeing. In this arrival bank snapshot that I'm going to share with you in just a second, typical April spring day, 1.5 hour time period, 41 arrivals, an aircraft every 2 minutes and 12 seconds. Arriving over that space. And what's overhead is RJ 700s and 747s, 800s. They are between 500, about 600 feet. This is what it sounds like. And it sounds like this every 2.5 minutes. This is the list. Within that 1.5 hour period of the flights that are occurring over that spot. So our basic message to the Board of Supervisors and to the developers is let's have some balance. We're very concerned about people who are going to move in close to a runway, and we're concerned about the economic impact it has, not only on the county, but on the region and the Commonwealth. And there is a balance to be had here, and we look forward to working with everyone in this room to achieve it.
What I wanted to do is talk a little bit about how we got here and then also what the future is for Metro. And a lot of people have talked about it a little bit beforehand, which was good. But, you know, in the late 1950s is when Dulles was really planned. And it was planned because we were entering into a new age of aviation. We were going from the old props to jet engines. And they made a lot more noise and a lot different noise. And so when they planned Dulles, originally, most people don't know this, but Dulles was planned to be out at the end where Burke Lake is. And the reason it was planned to be at Burke was because at that time, Shirley Highway was virtually unused. They had, which is now 395, if you can imagine that. So they said, we've got this big road, let's use it, let's put the airport down there. Well, thank God, General Casada, an Air Force general, made the astute decision that it needed to be somewhere else. And he, along with Till Hazel and a few other people, argued the case in federal court and ended up moving it way out here in the country and farmland of Dulles Airport. And what they did was they decided that it needed an umbilical cord to connect it to the district, and so they envisioned the access highway. And at the same time, they also envisioned making the road big enough so that they could put a rail system in the middle, because they knew back then that it needed rail. They also said, and there were politics involved as always, and there was a Congressman Broyhill out here who decided at the time that we needed some development in Loudoun County. So you'll note that people who live in Sterling have a sewer intercept that goes all the way to Blue Plains. That was built by the airport. You'll also note that we have an old Centerville Road and 28, a Centerville Road. Well, 28 was also built by the airport from Route 7 all the way down to Centerville. So the idea, the whole master plan, and if you really want to get upset with current planning, if you look at the old 1960 view of Washington, D.C. and its transportation network, we had 3 beltways that were supposed to be built by this time, not just the one that we live in now. So all those have been taken off the map since that time. Now, COG and the people that did the planning back then were spot on as far as the population for the area. They hit that number square on. And for mass transit, they've actually, with the Silver Line being built and what's contemplated in Maryland, they were also spot on that. What they've missed tremendously is on the road construction. That's what's been missing. But that's what happened back then. And you got to remember too that in the development out here, Tyson's Corner, when the airport opened, 123 and Route 7, I'm sure everybody's seen that picture of the country store and a 2-lane road. That was it. I was in at Williamsburg Junior High School and was scheduled to go to Yorktown back then in Arlington, which we called the end of the universe, because just beyond that was nothing. It was horse country and all that. So it's quite interesting to see how the whole area has evolved. In 1977, when I came off active duty flying tankers up in Plattsburgh with John, and came down here, John's a lot younger than I am, but came down here and started working at Dulles, we had a little over 2 million passengers. That was it. We had parking meters on the departures ramp, and we entertained the Fairfax Chambers black tie dinner in half of the main terminal, which is half of what you see now. It was 600 feet long instead of 1,240. So it's really gone. But we still had all this unused capability out there. We still had the median for the access highway. We had enough room on either side of the road for the toll roads. When you look at the hog fence on either side of the roads, those are the limits of Dulles property. When you go down 28 and you see the same thing, our fence line isn't where the fuel farm is on 28. We actually own over to the other side, which for the Hyatt, the people here, when they built it, was a big bone of contention because they wanted to put a sign up to help people find their way into here. And they went to VDOT forever, and finally VDOT realized, you got to talk to the airport. That's their land to put the sign on. And we finally got that worked out a little bit. But it's happening. But in '93, and Michael put up the slide, there's a letter that affirms an agreement between George Barton, the then chairman of the Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County, and Jim Wilding, the director of the airports, that the airport would give up land for the park and ride, would give up land for the rail station, the rail yard, the track, the line all the way through. And the agreement was that Loudoun County would be, a good partner in the deal and not put residential development in there and make it airport compatible uses, which is something that we still work to this day to do. And I know Chairman York worked hard to do that. And I think we'll have the same effect. Chairman Randall has said that she would too. So we're hoping to continue with that and move it forward. But rail has arrived. We got the first phase to Wheelie. We've got the second phase that's going to open in 2020. Right, Marcia?
We're going to finish on a schedule that would allow that to happen, but everybody needs to
I
remember
know.
that Metro will decide.
Exactly. And Paul Whitfield, who runs Metro, is a good old friend of ours and, ran BWI for years, and he knows the importance of schedules. So we'll get there, and we'll do it well. But rail is a critical component of this region. This morning there was the 3rd annual meeting of the 2030 group down in D.C., and we spent a little over 3 hours down there talking about how important, whether HQ2 and Amazon ends up here or not, there will be another one. And where it ends up here, whether it ends up in Montgomery County or Arlington or out here in Waterside, the thing that's critical is that we need the infrastructure, we need the options, and we need to be smart about how we apply it, because rail is our umbilical cord that connects this whole region together. And we'll have people that will be living in Montgomery County that want to work over in DC. Right now, COG says over 250,000 trips a day go across the Cabin John Bridge, and I call it Cabin John because they changed the name, but it's still the same old bridge that we all get stuck on. As my wife says, because my in-laws lived over in Potomac, was just get in the right lane, turn on the radio, take it easy, Keith, you'll get there at the same time. And you know it works out. But those are the problems we've got. But we've got to connect this region to be viable when we compete against the San Franciscos, the Detroits, the Torontos, and other places. And Washington, D.C. right now, as Dr. Fuller says, sits there, we're number 5. I mean, the thought of competing at the same level, we're sitting on a plane with Detroit right now. That ought to shock all of us, you know, that we're that far down the list. Now, sequestration and the political mumbo-jumbo of that did something to it, but we also have done it to ourselves, and we need to get the business more involved and really change the label of Washington to business rather than just government, and government that works and is effective, and that's what we're trying to do on that. But when rail first opened at Wheelie and the airport set up the shuttle bus, when I was a part of M1 running Dulles, we sat there and thought our biggest problem at Dulles, or one of the biggest problems, was getting employees to work at Dulles. All the ground handlers, the other people that worked in the concessions, that worked out in the midfield, they aren't living in $800,000 houses around the airport. They're living in other areas around the region that have to get in and out. The cost of transportation when you're an hourly employee is just, it's crazy. And we heard talk before about affordable housing units and that. An affordable housing unit in this area is a really wealthy neighborhood in a lot of other areas around the country. And so we were thinking the employees would use it. Well, when Metro opened, what we found is the employees didn't take the rail. It was cheaper for them to take the buses and do multiple connections. What we found was, and if you look at it, it's far easier to do in the fall now that sun's staying up longer, which is nice. But you look inside the shuttle buses running back and forth to the airport, and what do you see? Tons of travelers. It's amazing. You see drag-alongs, businessmen coming in and out using the Metro. And it's getting to be like Cleveland. If anybody's familiar with Cleveland, you can get virtually all around that city on the rail. Comes in from the suburbs out, terribly efficient in that. And that's what Paul's been able to do with Metro, is really increase the reliability, make it far more viable for everybody, and it's working well. But that was a shock to us, is the number of passengers that are using the rail rather than the employees. We hope that equation changes because, as somebody mentioned earlier, the new standards for building and eliminating parking around building to force people into rail or other ways, is that's what they're trying to do in a forced planning idea. The problem is that rail still only handles less than 10% of the population have access to rail. So the rest of the 90% still has to drive in a car. So we still got to work on that. But the key to this is it's another major building block in this region, taking the steps that it should to be back up in number 1 instead of sitting there at number 5 with Detroit and move forward. So we've got to do that. We've got to get a Potomac River crossing. We've got to work on increased road and infrastructure, and that, the whole package deal, is what will really put us on the map. But the rail station and the Silver Line extension is a huge step in that direction. And thank God I'll pat the airport authority on the back, but as I think it was Marcia said earlier, if it were not for the airport and giving the land down the median of the highway, not given the land for the rail stations and all that, we wouldn't even be sitting here talking about the Silver Line. I mean, it barely made it financially as it was, and that's with the airport building it. Nobody else stood up to the plate to do it. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't be talking about an HQ2, and we wouldn't be talking about the rest of the stuff. So, again, I thank you very much, and congratulations, and look forward to riding it in 2020.
Anyone have a question? Yes.
Thank you. I'm Dan Helmer. I'm a veteran running for Congress here in the 10th District. And I was curious, you talked a lot about more effective government and what we could be doing at the federal level. What would you like us to be doing differently at the federal level to encourage responsible metro development, transportation, better infrastructure in the area?
I'd like to see the federal government stand up to a role of bringing the region together. The federal government, when you look at the number of the percentage of people, in fact, the discussion's coming up now, it's going to be on funding. You know, the Maryland, Virginia, and the district all came together, albeit under pressure, to get Paul a bondable fund that he can actually work Metro and improve it. But the other part of it, a big part of it, is the funding that the federal government provides. When you look at the percentage, and off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is now, but there's a huge percentage of federal employees that are dependent upon Metro to come in and to access DC. And now, whether it's the Mark Center down or any place out here, is that support and that subsidy has to be there, rather than just putting dollars in pockets to, do something else. There needs to be a direct subsidy, a standardized, so it doesn't have to go every single budget cycle, continuing resolutions and everything else to make it work. But that's the other thing is the governance. And even though Metro is a compact among a number of different jurisdictions, I think we've got to get it out of the politics. We've got to get out of the political elected officials sitting on that Metro board. It's got to go back to business. And federal government can do a long way. Look what Ray LaHood did to get it going. Working with the airport and Jim Bennett to get the darn thing built. And that's the other kind of, we got to have a daddy in the room, or PC world, a mama in the room, one or the other. I'm more afraid of my mother than I am my father. But we need somebody like that to sit there and, map it out and help usher the course along. But this region, we saw it with the Metro funding as the 3 jurisdictions came together, 3 out of 4, because we still haven't heard from the federal. Because there are 4 jurisdictions here. But I think that's what we need to have, is to bring that along, and that would help immensely. Anything else?
Key follow-up to that is, what about light rail? We've talked about different ways. We've got
Yeah.
the old W and OD trail, is now paved and bikes and
It
cars.
is.
What do you think?
That's an option for sure. The thing that gets me is you see a lot of conversations about bus rapid transit too. And I say, well, bus rapid transit takes a lane. If you're trying to move bodies, my time at the airport was butts and seats. How do you get the maximum amount of butts into seats as quickly and as easily as you can? And the same thing when you look at 270 north of the Beltway, the Cabin John Bridge out here, it's how do you get the mass through the pipeline as fast and as smoothly as you can? And that's the big challenge. But
Doing the horse blanket, you got how many booms you got?
exactly.
It's not all how much
It,
gas, right?
it is. And John just reminded me, I wanted to bring up one thing. Where'd Michael go? I must have said something that offended him. No, you can't offend Michael Cooper. But a point that was made earlier, and the airport going through the noise study now, MIT just came out with a study that's really fascinating because and I've got a cousin who just hit 65 and had to retire from United, and I watched his final departure out of Frankfurt. And the thing is, what they do is they drop 20 degrees of flaps, take off, and keep it down to 200 knots and climb with 20 degrees of flaps to 10,000 feet. And they do it, what they do that is to reduce the power settings on it so you get max lift. Now, let's hope we don't lose an engine, but you keep going. The thing is that MIT has proven that, as Michael was saying, when we went from stage 4 to stage 2, and we're sitting at that right now, if you look at it's sort of a logarithmic scale is how the noise has gone down. But to get from stage 2 to what we want in the future with these electric airplanes or whatever they're talking about, the change isn't going to be that significant. There's not that much more to squeeze out of it. And what MIT found in a bunch of study is that the airframe itself makes almost more noise now than the engine does. And so that's why they're trying to fiddle around with reducing speeds and everything else to get them up. But that's on the very fancy new airplanes. The other ones that I seem to get all the time don't. But anyway, it's going to be a fascinating look in the future on how we do that. And the idea is we've got an economic engine at Dulles that has brought the largesse that we've got. If it were not for the airport, we wouldn't have Metro line. If it wasn't for the airport, we wouldn't have the data centers. If it weren't for the airport, we wouldn't have all the corporate, you see all the international corporations up and down 28 and the access highway that's opened it up. And we need to protect that asset, and we don't need to get into a situation like National Airport has, where you've got everybody screaming to shut it down. So, thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity.